Hello, Professor and classmates. Rob Mallet here. This is my presentation on asbestos in post-World War II America. So what is asbestos? Asbestos is a group of 6 naturally occurring fibrous minerals. They are broken down into 2 subcategories, serpentine and amphibole. The serpentine category has one member, chrysotile. Chrysotile is characterized by being long and wavy. It was considered the safe asbestos by the industry. Since the fibers were long and wavy, it was easily woven into textiles and other materials. Shorter fibers could be used as strengtheners to other matrices. This is why chrysotile made up 95% of all asbestos used. Amphibole category has the other 5 fibers. These are characterized as being short and needle-like. They are considered a hazardous asbestos because they would stay airborne once made airborne. The only difference between amphibole and serpentine, other than its appearance, would be that amphibole is resistant to acid. So for acid applications, amphiboles would be used. So the bad about asbestos? Inhalation of airborne fibers. Lung ailments were observed in ancient Greece. Roman slave buyers were advised not to buy slaves that had worked in the asbestos industry, since they would die young or end up with crippling ailments. Here we see a comparison of the asbestos fiber size compared to human hairs and grains of rice. Modern medical diagnosis of asbestos ailments are asbestosis, which is the non-cancerous fibrotic scarring of the lungs alveoli. Fiber gets into your lungs, your body tries to get rid of it, and in the process damages the surrounding tissue. Lung cancer, it's a lot like asbestosis, but instead of just scarring, it goes cancerous. Mesothelioma is the cancer of the chest lining. It's theorized that fibers work their way from the lung into the chest lining, and that's where it goes cancerous. The good? Well, asbestos has a low thermal conductivity, it's non-flammable, high tensile strength, it's durable, it has acoustical properties, which makes it good for boiler and pipe insulation, fireproofing, additive to other materials to make them stronger and more resilient. And acoustical properties, you can add it to ceiling tiles and ceiling plasters. But the overall benefit of asbestos was it was available and it was affordable. There were large deposits in both the US and Canada, easily accessible and easy to move. So there was a perfect storm. All these pluses and either a lack of knowledge or ignoring knowledge of the negatives. It was flammable, strong, durable, and cheap. There was no other feasible alternative during this time period. No other material could be used as many different ways as asbestos could, and as cheaply. And at this point in time, all the soldiers were coming home, wanting to pursue the American dream, moving with their families. So we had the baby boom. All these families moving out to the suburbs. Entire neighborhoods of housewives were pregnant at the same time. So there was going to be a sudden surge in the school population. So there was a sudden enormous building boom in both the private and public sectors. You add this to the miracle material that was asbestos, and you end up with asbestos everywhere. It was in so many building materials, 3,000 building materials. And with the massive school building, 45% of all public schools still in use in 1999 were built between 1950 and 1969. 3,000 materials. And a school is an ideal place for asbestos because you want to install materials that are going to last, that don't need huge maintenance, that once installed we're going to be there for a long time. It could take the wear and tear of being exposed to kids every day. And so it's easier to list materials that didn't contain asbestos than to list all the ones that do. So you go into a school that you're going to renovate, you need to assume all the materials contain it except for metal, glass, and wood. Everything else needs to be sent to a lab to determine that there is no asbestos there. So what was the beginning of the end of the asbestos industry? Well, the health hazards can no longer be denied. And so in the 1970s, with public concern and worker suits against manufacturers, Congress enacted the Clean Air Act, which created the EPA. In 1973, the EPA introduced a national emission standard for hazardous air pollutants. For the first time, asbestos was identified as a hazardous air pollutant. EPA's standard of no visible emissions meant that visible asbestos fibers were no longer acceptable. And with this realization of all the asbestos in the schools, EPA later enacted the Asbestos Hazard Emergency Response Act in 1987. This was designed to help schools manage asbestos in place and abate it when necessary. It also created the Asbestos Model Accreditation Plan, which gave birth to the asbestos industry, because now you need specialized workers who have the proper training and education to work with asbestos. So what do you need to know today? Asbestos materials are not banned. There's only a handful that are banned. That's fireproofing and pipe insulation, and a couple of them like mill boards and cloth materials, easily friable materials. So you can still find, you can go to Home Depot today and find asbestos material on the shelf. So a thorough inspection is still required today of any building prior to renovation or demolition activity. And it's a good idea because workers will ask, disposal facilities will ask, and regulatory authorities, if you ever get a visit from them, will ask. So this is why asbestos was so important to America after World War II, and even today in a negative light, but it fuels a multi-million-dollar industry of getting rid of it. I hope you learned something, and thank you for your time.